Happen today. Hello, Luca. This is what was supposed to happen today. We were supposed to have the SoCal Pilot Group people, which are the Belgians that hang around. They just fly around this place and they do their thing, and nobody really knows who they are or what they do. They're actually kind of cool guys. And they were supposed to give a presentation today. Unfortunately, they've got FAA inspectors and all sorts of other things coming in. So they said, sorry, can't do it. And I thought, great. Andrea, my wife, just gave a presentation to the 99. So she put a presentation together, worked on it for ages, went down really well. So I thought, brilliant. She can give her presentation. No, she can't. She has something to do this morning. And so, third best, with not that much time to present, I'll prepare it. So this is kind of thrown together. This is going to be raw, no time to have gone through it or run it as a, well, let's just see how this goes, shall we? When Frank asked me to do this, I thought, well, and I fresh in my mind was my wife's presentation, which my wife works at the Living Desert. She's the vet there. So she was giving a presentation about aviation and zoo. I don't know how she tied that together, but I thought, well, when Frank said, well, can you do something? I thought, well, I don't know what to do. So this is the only thing I could think of. And I don't know how this is going to go, so we'll find out. So let's start here. This here, how does this work? Oh, there it is. That's me in this little airplane here. This is Whiskey Delta 373, WD 373. It's a 1951 de Havilland Chipmunk. I first flew this airplane then, 1986, as an air cadet. I sat in the back of that airplane and I was flown around the sky. That was my first flight in 1986. The next time I flew this airplane was October 2021 in the front seat. The owner very kindly allowed me to fly it in England because he knew that I had a connection to this airplane. And it figured out that it was exactly 35 years and 4 months, as it turned out later, I got to fly this. And so, okay, the zoo part of the presentation. Hidden are animals in this presentation. So here's the first one. So there's a chipmunk. This is all I can give you, I'm sorry. I had like an hour. Okay. So it was exactly 35 years between these two flights, from my first one and from when I actually got to fly the airplane next. A lot happened between those 35 years, I figured out. They must have, because of where I came from. So yeah, that's look at that chap. No gray hair, nothing. And this is me recently in a 737 Max. You know that one. So it went from that to that. I just don't really know how it happened. But there is a man who tried to find out, as some of you will already know. This bloke. So, Justin, really nice guy. Frank put it in the email there. He has a little podcast. For those of us that listen to podcasts, I listen to this guy a lot. And he basically picks anybody connected to aviation. Anything. It can be general aviation, it can be airlines, it can be military, it can be anything to do with aviation. And he just interviews people. And he's a very, very good interviewer. We bumped into each other at Oshkosh, and he said, I would like to interview you. And I thought, why? You do know me, right? But he did. And so episode 197 from 2021 is me and Justin having a little chit-chat. I've never listened to that interview. Okay, I had not ever listened to that interview until Frank asked me to do this. And this is my get out of jail, because I listened to it for the first time. And what I thought I'd do is, I would steal his questions to me and then answer them for you with a little bit more fluff and a little bit more visual, so that you could kind of maybe see this little journey from chipmunk number 1 to 35 years later, and kind of try and figure out how that worked. So that's it. That's what I'm going for. You ready for this?
We're ready.
10 questions. That's what he asked. 3 of them are rubbish, so I'm not going to answer them. Number 1, why aviation? What was it that got you into aviation? It's really easy to figure this one out for me, because I can take myself back there very easily. I was 9 years old. How old are you, Luca?
8.
We're very similar. I was 9 years old in 1982. This is called a Handley Page Herald. It is an old, rubbish, English turboprop airliner. It looks rubbish, doesn't it? This is actually the airliner. This is the first one I flew on.
Whoa.
It's at a museum in the UK called Duxford. And that, where the little arrow is pointing, is the window that I looked out of when I sat in that little aeroplane. And I was going on a school trip from my hometown in Southampton on the south coast of England to the Channel Islands. No, not these Channel Islands. These Channel Islands. There's Southampton, where I was born, and off of the coast of France, there are these little islands called the Channel Islands. They're their own self-governed islands, and they're very lovely. About an hour flight from Southampton. And they're in the middle of the English Channel, and they have this reputation of fog pouring over these islands at certain times of the day. And so we get on this airplane. It's fine. There's no inspiration. We take off. It's kind of cool. But there's nothing. There's no sparks. We make the approach into Guernsey. Fog. Go around. I can't see anything. It's kind of dull. And off we go, and we divert to Jersey. And we come down the approach, and I can see the wheels come down, the flaps come down, all of these things moving, but I still can't see anything out of the window except for cloud. And in my mind, in my 9-year-old mind, what I actually see is cloud, 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 runway, and we land. And I thought, whoa, wait. You've got to be kidding me. How did that happen? I wanted to find out that's me. I wanted to find out from this guy, how on earth did you do that? How did you come down? Because I couldn't see anything. It was cloud. And then the runway appeared like magic from nowhere, and we landed. And so I stayed in my seat while all of the other kids exited at the back of the airplane. I stayed there because I wanted to go forwards. I wanted to get to that guy and ask him, how did you do that? Unfortunately, my teachers had different ideas for me, and they ushered me off of the airplane. And so I had to get off without seeing that guy to find out how he did it. I don't remember anything about that trip. I don't remember anything. I remember the flight home like it was yesterday, because by that time, my spark had hit. That was it. I was captured forever. I wanted to know everything about aviation, like this guy. Everything. I want to know how this works. I want to figure it out. So that's how I got interested in aviation in the first place. Then Justin says, oh, there's another zoo animal. He says, I know I'm stretching this a bit, right? He says, he asked me about my childhood, because I didn't really come from much. you know, we just appear in this world. I can only tell you my story, and my story was that there's my parents, that's my mom and my dad, on his Bonneville. Close your ears, Luca. Apparently I was conceived on that. And so, you're good. And so, my mom and dad did their best, but we were broke, absolutely broke. There was no money in the family. Certainly not for a kid that wanted to get involved with aviation. That's lunacy. It's not gonna happen. We were raised in the equivalent of what would be welfare over here. So we had nothing. Justin snipped onto this and said something along the lines of, well, you kind of probably knew there's no way you could go off and be a pilot. So what happened next? Where did you go? Oh, and did you figure out how they landed in fog? Well, let's get to that first. Yes. About a quarter of a century before the iPhone came out, I had to go to this place. This was our local library where I grew up. And I spent hours in that place, finding every aviation book that I could to try and figure out how they landed that airliner. And I found out about the ILS system, the instrument landing system. It's fantastic. Isn't it great?
I know, it's so easy. All you have to do is you jump on when you're like a bit above the air, disengage it, throw it on the ILS system, and all you have to do is pull the joystick up and you land there.
You know the worrying thing is, he's going to be my boss one day. And then I'm going to have to be really nice to him. You're going to do good. So I'm all in by this time. I'm fascinated. I'm spending so much time in this library trying to find out about aviation. But here was the thing that helped. My dad also knew that I had this fascination. He kind of liked aviation as well. And just about that time, in 1985, a new aviation museum opened up in Southampton, my hometown. That's it, in 1985. So you can see it's kind of dominated by this flying boat, this Sandringham flying boat. There's also a Spitfire down there, there's an S6B, which was a prototype. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of airplanes in there, but that stood out, of course. And so what do I want to do? Because they were saying, we're running cockpit tours today. I want to get in there. So my dad and I go up into this cockpit, and I sat in that seat. And it just, it blew my mind. There was a connection that was made that day, just sitting there with those instruments, and the wheel and the levers and all sorts of things, everything about it. But the really interesting thing to me was the person that was giving the tour was my age, in a uniform, and it said Air Cadets on it. I thought, well, what are the Air Cadets? Why does this guy know more about this than I do? How does he know what that does? How does he know what is going on? And why am I not involved with this? So I got involved. So this is what was then called the Air Training Corps. It's the Junior Royal Air Force, basically. So I joined this squadron in Southampton, 44 Squadron. And in the blurb, this is basically what the Air Training Corps is about. The opportunity for cadets to gain a taste of military life, perfect. Learn about aviation subjects, great. Engineering, military history, yes. Participate in activities, sports, sounds good to me. Adventure training, ceremonial drill, oh yes sir. You ready? English. Longest way up, shortest way down. I remember that. Rifle shooting, great. We stayed at RAF station camps. Flew on simulators. Did some field crowd. Flying. Other wait, hang on, flying? We fly here? Yes, we do. Look at that handsome chap. Yeah. And I don't mean Matthew Broderick. My God, what a nerd. I can't believe I found that for you. No one's ever seen this. June 1986, I'm in the Air Training Corps, 14 years old, and they said, okay, we're going to go out and do some air experience flying. What's that then? We go here, to a place called Bournemouth, on the south coast of England, to this airplane here, Whiskey Delta 373. There it is. 1986, I turn up, I know as much about aviation as I could possibly know at that time. What I didn't know was, how was I going to react when I go fly? You know, because you flew with James. He has a silly accent as well. He's a nice guy though. I didn't know. So I jumped in, really nervous. And I realized very quickly, oh yeah, this is good. This is what I want to do. And then the guy up front, who was actually, I didn't know at the time, a guy called Wing Commander Ernie Jones, who was the leader of the original Royal Air Force Red Arrows. I didn't know that, but he was. And he said, right, you fly. I thought, oh. And we flew. And I realized, I can do this. Great. And we don't have any money, but the Queen has a ton of money. She can train me to fly. I don't need to even bring any money to the table here. So I'm going to join the RAF as a pilot. Perfect. This is going to work out great. And then I went for an eye test. So dear old Flight Sergeant Steve, as he was at the time, went along for my RAF aptitude and physical, and we got to the eyesight test, and I said, well, how did I do? And they said, no, look over here. Oh. You may have noticed I was spectacled as a kid, and my eyesight was terrible. Unfortunately for the RAF, it's definitely not good enough to be a pilot. And they said, well, we can't do anything about that. But I told them, well, you do realize I'm like the next best fighter pilot that the UK is going to produce. They didn't seem impressed by that. But they said, how about being a navigator? Yeah, no. I'm not going to sit in the back of an airplane. I'm sorry, I'd already figured out for myself that I'm going to be flying airplanes for a living. No, I'm not going to do that. Always wondered what might have happened. But now I'm stuck because I still can't afford to fly. My parents still didn't find a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so now I really need some direction on how I can possibly fly as a broke kid from Southampton. This was my next chance. British Airways have a cadet program. They'll pay for your flying. All you've got to do is get through their tests. The first thing you need is some education. So I was a bit of a lazy student at school, got to be honest. I kind of knew I could do it, but I just couldn't be bothered. I just thought it was a bit of a waste of time, honestly, because I had nothing to go for. But British Airways said, well, you're going to need 5, this is an English thing, O-levels, ordinary level. I don't know what the equivalent would be here. High school sort of stuff. You need 5 of these exams. Then you need 2A, advanced levels, kind of college, university stuff. You need 5 of those, 2 of those, and then you can apply. Okay. Then you apply with the other 3,000 to 4,000 people, and then 50 to 100 will be selected. The odds are not stacked in your favor on this one, but I thought, well, okay, if this is it, then school is the place that I start. That's where I go to. Now, okay, so I go to school and I become a very strange student, because before I was just, a mediocre student. wasn't really interested. All of a sudden, any subjects that had anything to do with aviation, I was all in. I was a model A student. The teachers that taught those just believed, this guy's great. The other classes that had nothing to do with aviation, you should see my report card. It's really embarrassing. I could not be bothered. And the reason was time. This is a very loose connection here, but don't worry about this, Luca. A little old band called Pink Floyd that I seem to have been into at that time. And there was a song that stood out for me called Time, about life starting and you being left behind because you're trying to prepare for life that's already started. That was basically the theme of it. And that kept on going through my head, that I'm wasting time here. I'm totally wasting my time. But I know I have to get these O levels and A levels, have to spend the next several years of my life purely so that I can apply to be able to continue with my passion. So I did the O level side, the high school equivalent side, and did great. Then went to college, and all I needed to do was to pick 2 subjects. There's nothing aviation, or there wasn't then, there's no aviation schools in the UK, so I just had to pick 2 subjects so that I could qualify for this British Airways cadet program. So I picked English literature, and some other thing that I don't even remember. It was absolutely pointless. I just thought, this is an absolute waste of my time. It has nothing to do with aviation. It's not going to help me as a pilot. Why am I doing this? It doesn't seem right. I was kind of looking for a bit of direction. And then this happened. A kitchen man turned up. Well, what happened was, my dad was a mechanic, but he was also a part-time photographer. And he was employed by a guy that had a kitchen showroom to take some photos. So we went to this place, and my dad was taking photos of his kitchen. And I noticed on the wall there was a picture of this guy, the guy that owned the kitchen showroom, in a pilot's uniform. I thought, oh. So I got speaking to him, and I started to talk to him. And he said, and this was just his advice, I was saying to him, I seem to be wasting my time. I'm trying to get into the British Airways, and he went, oh, good luck with that. Okay, well, and now I'm studying English literature. It's not very inspiring. I don't want to learn it, but I know I have to, so that I can be a pilot. And the two don't seem to go together. And he said, stop all of this nonsense. Turn up at the airlines already qualified. Go get your private license. And turn up at the airlines already qualified. I thought, oh, that's a different way, a different approach. And so I did. I go all out when I make a decision, I suppose. But I just quit that day. No more college for me. I'm going to go get a job to pay for flying, to get the private pilot's license, to apply to any airline that will take me. Stop wasting time. That's it. All of a sudden it made sense. No more time wasting. Get on with it. Go, 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 go. That's the decision I made. Now, I really got into this job thing. I got into finance. But I did well. I did a lot of strange jobs. I repoed cars, and I was a debt collector and theft investigator, and all sorts of weird financy related jobs. And I did well. I was all in. I was getting paid well. I was also flying at the time as well. You know, just on the weekends, building a few hours here, building a few hours there, enjoying the flying, but getting into the job more than the flying. And so this is what happened. My job career went great. My flying sort of trickled along. I got my private, I got my multi, I got my commercial, I got my 250 hours, but it took 10 years for me to get my private. 10 years after I took my first flight, I had my private. It's not good. And then this happened. That's my aunt. My aunt lived there. She lived in a trailer in Southampton. Third one along. That's my aunt's house. And we were very, very close. She never married. She was always single. And her dream was to work for her life, so that when she retired, she could take a cruise around the world. That's what she talked about forever. And 3 weeks before she retired, she and I sat down. And that's when she told me she had cancer. And she never took the cruise. Oh, I'm getting shivers. Hasn't happened for a while. So she said to me, do not ever do what I did. Get on with it. Don't wait. Get on with it. Do what you need to do now. Don't save up. Just get on with it. There's no time. This time thing comes in again. Right about that time, because I had sorted my finances out and I was doing quite well at work, I had a whole bunch of credit card applications. Now, this is not sound advice. However, I took those credit cards and went crazy with them and thought, I'm done. I need to build these hours. I need to get myself ready for my airline career. I'm already way behind my friends that have got on and are doing well with their airline career. I'm not. I figured myself out financially because of work, but I'm not flying. I'm not doing what I thought I wanted to do when I left school. And one way I could help myself was to come here. Because at the time, because of the exchange rate between the pound and the dollar, 1 flight hour in the UK equaled 2 flight hours in the US. Aha! And luckily, there's a whale. See the zoo thing? I don't know how many you've missed. There's been about 6 so far. But I'm building the zoo. It's a rough night. Luckily, my friend was one of the original Virgin Atlantic pilots. And so he gave me jump seat passes. And so it didn't cost me anything to come over to the US. I needed to find somewhere to go and get as much flight time as I possibly could with all of this new credit card money that had flowed in. And this was the day when the internet was brand new. I couldn't afford to make the phone call to the US. So I went online to this newfangled internet thing, and I found sdfti.com. Still exists today. San Diego Flight Training in Montgomery. And I figured out quite quickly, well, this is what I can do. I can come here and I can build a bunch of time. So I contacted them. They said, well, what do you want to do? What kind of flying do you want to do? Single engine, multi-engine, nighttime, instrument? What do you want to do? I said, as much as I can for the best quality I can get for my buck. That's what I want to get, because I want to move on. And they said, okay, how about doing a conversion from your UK licenses? Let's do a commercial multi-instrument. Okay, how long have you got? 3 weeks, let's do it. So that's what I did. So I came over here and I left. There it is, it still exists. I went to see them about a year ago. So I came here, I got my commercial multi-instrument. The FAA gave me a little certificate. I threw it in a drawer. Don't need it. Justin asks, remember Justin? Sorry, it's just long. Justin said, so when you got here, did you thought you were, did you think you were going to work here, or are you going to go back to the UK? Which is a fair question, considering where I am right now. But the truth is, immigration, in the same way that you guys can't just go to the UK and turn up and say, right, I'm here to work. It doesn't work like that. I can't come here and say, right, I'm ready to work. The US was not on my radar. The US was here purely for finances. That I could fly and build hours ready for my job back in the UK. So no, I returned. This was my little basement apartment with my lovely view of a wall out of the window. I don't know why they put a window in there. There's nothing there. But that's what I had. You can't see the mold either. But what I did get was, I was able to grab a whole bunch of multi-engine nighttime, get my commercial multi-instrument. Not that that was going to be anything I'd use, of course. It was fun. Flying here is fun. Never any thought of working in the US. It wasn't really an option. So, question 4 that Justin asked was, you felt like you're falling behind with your friends, and you kind of had to choose, what do I do? Do I carry on being steady Eddie, or do I just go for it and put the resources to my career? Golden eagle, another zoo animal.
Oh, God.
See, you got to pay attention. And it's the same advice I gave myself that I give anyone else. If you've got a passion, get on with it. Whatever you have been given, whatever you can get, whatever opportunities you can take, if you know you have that passion, just get on with it and do it. Time is ticking by. You're sitting here listening to me drone on, so that's not good, is it? It's kind of hypocritical, really, isn't it? But anyway, so just get on with it is what I'd say. The next thing that Justin asked, he was interested in this UK-US comparison and asked me, what are the differences that you found between the US and the UK system? That's the UK. That's a VFR sectional from the UK. I actually have one in the hangar as well, if you ever want to look at one. It's nuts. There is so much airspace there that you are not allowed into. There are some big differences. Okay, some of this is cut off, sorry. But in the US, I've seen both sides. There's so much freedom to fly over here. It's incredible. In the UK, I cannot go to an airport, get onto the ramp, sort of here, that's similar. I can't go and jump into an airplane, start it up, taxi out, turn on the runway lights, go fly, not talk to anybody, land again, put the airplane away and walk away. That does not exist in the UK. Does not exist. I will need permission to go to an airplane. I will need somebody to collect a fee to turn the lights on. I will need to talk to somebody in the tower when the airport is open, because they can't afford to keep a tower controller there all day long, so I have to pay for that. Then to go fly, I have to get into this system, into the ATC system. That costs money. Then to land at any airport in the UK, it costs money. Every single landing. So if you're doing pattern work, every single landing costs you money. If you do instrument work, every single approach will cost you money. Before I could go and practice approaches at Bristol Airport, I would have to call the air traffic control people, and the first thing they would ask for is my credit card number. Every approach was £30, so about $50 in 1992. So, it's a lot of money. It racks up crazy. Over here, there is a lot of freedom to fly. I know some of us have encountered this, but there is way less bureaucracy here as far as licensing and yes, even medical. The bureaucracy that exists in this country with medical and licensing, believe me, in the UK, it's way, way, way more restrictive. Anyway, so there are big differences between the two. I like it here. One of the other really cool things, the cool differences that I found when I came and flew here was this. So these are the 3 highest peaks in the UK. That's our mountains. When we go to a mountain flying course in the UK, we're going to 3,000 feet. We're getting lightheaded. I grow oxygen. If you put all three of the highest peaks in the UK, Wales, England, and Scotland, on top of each other, you still wouldn't be as high as Gorgonio. So that blew my tiny mind. That was crazy to me. So I really, really did enjoy this. Enjoy this place. Next question. Right, you have your FMA commercial ticket, you go back to the UK, you throw it in the drawer. What next? Well, I just knew I needed to keep flying. Somehow, some way. I had credit cards, so I could do that. I also knew that that was gonna run out at some point, and it was gonna catch up with me. So what did I do? I did Steve's flying service. So at airfields in the UK, Steve would turn up, and he would notice, look at that little Bonanza over there that's not being used. Who owns that then? Oh, that's Frank. Really? Hey, Frank, you do know that if you leave your airplane and you don't run it, and it's bad for the airplane. You've got to get the oil circulating. You've got to get the thing warm. You've got to run it. Otherwise, it's not going to be working when you want to fly it. What I can do for you, once a month, I'll take your airplane out. I'll fly it for an hour, just for you. I'll warm it up. I'll note anything that needs to be corrected on it. I'll clean it. I'll tie it down so that you know when you come to your airplane, it's ready to go. Yay. That worked. I had a lot of people that I would go and fly for. That didn't bring in any money for me. I had to do other jobs, but it kept me flying, and it kept hours going into my book. So that kind of worked out. And then one day, I had a big break. Maybe. This is Les, good friend of mine, Les Hounson. And he was a training captain for a crummy little airline called Ryanair.
There's one thing. Ryanair, does it pull the reverse thrusters out in midair? Because if it does, Ryanair has a...
I never knew, I do not believe that that Les or anybody I knew at Ryanair did that.
Because I've seen mini clips of people absolutely putting their tray table, flipping it around while it
Yes.
lands.
Now Ryanair have a bit of a reputation these days. There's a good, I'm going to come back to that. It's a really good point. This guy knows his stuff. Anyway, back in time. We'll go back. There's Les. That's Ryanair. That's a 737-200. And I used to fly with Les a lot on his 737-200. Is this recording? I used to fly Les's 737-200 with passengers on board a lot. Les said, come and work for Ryanair. You've got the job. Like, great. When do I start? Well, first thing is the licensing. Let's imagine Europe as America. Each state of the US, in our world in England, would have a licensing authority. And so if you, let's say you're a California-based pilot, and now you want to go and work for an Arizona company, you would have to go to the Arizona licensing department and do a flight test and do a written exam, and they would convert your license so that you could then fly an Arizona-based airplane. That's Europe. That's how it works. So he said, well, great, this is an Irish airline. Go to the EAA in Dublin, get your licenses converted, and go to Weston Airfield, just outside of Dublin, and go get your commercial flight test for the Irish Aviation Authority to satisfy everyone. The job's yours, off we go. So I went and started that process. I quit my job and went into aviation. This is the River Liffey in Dublin. So I turn up here. This is where the Irish Aviation Authority is. I had already started my flight training with Ryanair. And I go to these people and say, okay, here are my credentials. And they said, great things are happening. You know that place America? Yes. Well, it's crazy, but what they do is they have one licensing system for the whole country. Nuts. And everyone has the same medical for the whole country. Wow, that's crazy. We're going to do that in Europe. It's called the JAA, the Joint Aviation Authority. We're doing that now. The first thing we've harmonized amongst all of Europe is the medical standards. Great. Why does this affect me? Well, it kind of does. About 10 years prior, I had had LASIK surgery. You remember Spectacled Steve? Well, Spectacled Steve was fed up with being Spectacled Steve, and he went and got laser surgery. One of the first, actually it was really one of the first, if not the first, laser surgery that opened in the UK. I went for it because it was a buy one, get one free deal. I bought the left eye, and they did the right one for free. Always looking for a bargain. Anyway, so the guy said, you got through everything on your medical, but, so you meet the standard, but we don't approve of how you meet the standard. What do you mean? Well, you had laser surgery, so that's cheating.
Oh, geez.
What? What are you talking about? In these new regulations from Europe, there is nothing in here that says that you can meet our standard by having laser surgery before. Okay, what? That doesn't make any sense. The FAA are great, you know, the world's biggest aviation community center, say, great. Previously, my licenses said, great, but the new European regulation, yes, this is the problem. And actually, the director of the Irish Aviation Authority, we sat down and he said, I'm going to support you as best I can. We needed a test case. You're it. So I have to deny you. So, no job, because I quit that. Ryanair say, we're done. No money. We're back to square one. So I go to the River Liffey, and there's a bridge there, and I sat on that bridge, on the steps of the bridge. And this guy came into my head. Very, very strange. At that moment, when I was absolutely at my lowest low, this guy came into my head. This is Group Captain Douglas Bader. He was a World War II Battle of Britain fighter ace. Now Douglas knew, in the same way as Luca and as me, he knew aviation is for me. This is what I want to do. So he joined the Royal Air Force. He was excellent. He was picked to be the aerobatic display pilot, one of three, for that particular year. I think it was 1936. I'll come back to that. Anyway, so he was picked. Fantastic. Douglas was a bit of a rebel. He was well known for low aerobatics. And he was told off many, many times, don't do low aerobatics. Well, yeah. When you're that age, this is the Bristol Bulldog, that's Douglas. This was the display team. And they popped along to Reading Aero Club. And they were kind of gelded a little bit. Oh, you guys should beat up the field. You guys should do some aerobatics for us. And so Douglas decided to break the rules again. And this is what happened. Those are his shoes after he had crashed. And he lost his legs. Both legs were amputated. And that began a process of recovery. Survival first of all, but then recovery. And that led to wartime in Europe, where the RAF were desperate for pilots. And Douglas said, yeah, I don't have any legs, but I've learned how to walk on tin legs. I don't really need my legs, do I? To be a fighter pilot? And you guys need fighter pilots. And they said, there's nothing in these regulations that say that you can fly without legs. There's nothing in these regulations that say you can meet the standards by having laser surgery. Wow, okay. And he fought the system. And he fought the system, and he fought the system. And he demonstrated and demonstrated and annoyed them to the point at which they said, okay, we'll give you a flight test. So Douglas Bader became Group Captain Douglas Bader at that time, a highly decorated Battle of Britain ace that is credited, among many others, with the turn of the war after the Battle of Britain in Europe. Douglas was actually shot down during the next stage of the battle, and he was captured and put into prison. He convinced the Germans that it was unfair that he didn't have his tin legs. One of them had gone down with his airplane. And so they agreed with the Brits that on a bombing raid, nuts, they would drop a spare leg for him. So that happened. And once he got his leg, so now he had 2 legs back, he escaped. Which the Germans didn't really like. He escaped again. He escaped again. He ended up at Colditz Castle, which was the you cannot ever escape from here place. He tried, but the war was over before he needed that. The inspiration from Douglas was, there must be a way around this. He had no legs. I just got a little, I don't have a problem, but I have a bureaucratic problem. But hang on a minute. I've got a commercial multi-instrument from the FAA who say, you're good to go. Your medical's okay with us. But I live in Europe. There must be N-registered airplanes in Europe. I'll go find them, and I'll go fly them. And that's what I did. So I sought out every N-reg airplane I could and convinced the owners that they needed me to fly their airplanes. That led to dealers, Cirrus, Cessna. Those airplanes were built here, taken to the UK, kept on the N register until they were sold to other European countries. They would then be re-registered once they got there. But in the meantime, when they were being demonstrated, they were on the N register. I'm your man. So I became a demonstration pilot. Some days I would turn up, I was demonstrating a Cessna product, and the next day I would turn up to an airfield and I would be demonstrating a Cirrus product. And funny enough, it happened a few times where I took a guy up in, let's say, a 182, and he said, this seems fine, but you know, I'm flying one of those Cirruses tomorrow, so convince me why I should buy this instead of a Cirrus that's going to turn up tomorrow. And I said, well, when I bring the Cirrus for you to fly tomorrow, I'll convince you of which one you need. So I was it. I did the demonstration flights for Cessna and Cirrus. Of course, what that also meant was I then delivered the airplane from the dealer to these new owners. And those delivery flights got longer and longer. Until one day, somebody said to me, could you go get this airplane? A yak, another zoo animal. Can you go get this airplane from Lithuania and bring it to the UK? So I went and got my Russian commercial license, and I went and flew this. This was my first real ferry flight. I was just a freelance commercial pilot. I would fly anything, anywhere, anytime, any price. Doesn't matter, I just need to keep flying. This ferry flying thing seemed quite good. The next thing that happened was the Cessna dealer said, can you go get one of the Cessnas from Wichita? The answer, yes. Where's Wichita? At the time, I became the world's busiest oceanic ferry pilot. I know that because I knew the others. And I was way more busy than they were because I would fly anything, anywhere, anytime, any price. Doesn't matter. So I got to fly a lot of cool little airplanes, mainly across the Atlantic. And then you get a reputation, and you fly bigger things, better things. You get a reputation. Okay, this guy's turning up with this airplane, making it fun for the owner. That was really important. You've got an airplane coming across the Atlantic. Look forward to it. I'm going to give you updates. I'm going to make it fun. Before I get there, I'm going to clean it. I'm going to make it look nice. It's going to arrive and you're going to be over the moon with it. That's what I like to do. So it led to working for brokers, flying some corporate jets around and some old airliners. Another 737. The thrush. That's a zoo animal, right? Isn't that a bird? Sure. So some cool airplanes. And Cirrus, there were 4 of us that became Cirrus's main delivery pilots. In the early days of Cirrus, they were only built in Duluth and they were built as one-piece airplanes, that you could not dismantle them, so you couldn't ship them. But the people in Europe got to hear about Cirrus and they wanted them. Then the people in Africa heard about Cirrus and they wanted them. And there were 4 of us. We're still, all 4 of us are very good friends today. And we delivered the majority of the early Cirruses to Europe and Africa. How'd we get there? This way. So we go from Duluth. If it was summertime, we would take these hops here. We would go to Goose Bay in Labrador. And then we go to Narsarsuaq in Greenland. Then we go to Keflavik in Iceland. Down to Wick in Scotland, and then to Groningen, Holland, which is where the European dealer was. They would remove the ferry tank, 110-gallon ferry tank, put the seats back in, and sell the airplane. If it was winter time, the weather up here was awful. And so we would go to St. John's, Newfoundland, go straight across the Atlantic to Shannon. So we'd have a bigger tank in, 110 gallons in the back, and a 50-gallon in the right seat. Basically a flying bomb, but that's what we would do. So we'd go across to here, to Shannon, and then we'd go to Groningen. If we're going to Africa, we would go from St. John's down to the Azores, and then down to Dakar, and then down through the western side of Africa to a place called Lanseria, near Johannesburg, which is where the African dealer was. And then we would get on a flight, come back to Duluth, and take another one. Or sometimes we pick up another job in here and fly something back and just go backwards and backwards and backwards. If we're going the Pacific route, we'd have 2 options really. We would go up through without tanks. You can do it without tanks. We go up through Anchorage, go down through the Aleutians, probably stop at Dutch Harbor, then go to Adak, over to Petropavlovsk in Kamchatsky, and then down to Japan and off to wherever we needed to go. If we had tanks, we'd go out of Hayward, we'd go to Hilo in Hawaii, and then to Majuro, then to Guam, and up through there. If you were going south to Australia, you would basically head down this way. I never did any Australian deliveries, so I can't tell you about those. But those were other people. My specialty was the Atlantic. What this gave me this is a Baron, by the way. This is what it would look like. You basically put a whole bunch of ferry tanks in here. And to get into the pilot seat, you basically crawl over the top of this one, go head first down to the rudder pedals, then contortion yourself back up and sit, look around and think, well, this is safe. Let's go to Japan. These are Russian MiG fighters that we were told very often, if you do not keep on this course and you try and shortcut, they'll be coming after you. This is in Petropavlovsk, and they reminded us many, many times that they would come after us. What this ferrying career ended up giving me was about 40 different types. So a lot of experience on some very cool airplanes. It was one of those things of learning an engine instead of an airplane. Airplanes you can figure out, up, down, left, right, figure out the speeds. Engine management was the big key. PT6s are all the same. Like Homins, Continentals, you learn how to run the engine instead of the airplane. So the types were basically engine specific, that's what we figured out. But we got to fly a lot of different airplanes, which was very, very cool. We're getting there, we're almost done. Apparently you wrote a book about this. Yes, I did, that one. I didn't mean to write a book, but it ended up being a book. And when it came to selling it, I felt very bad about selling it, because who on earth wants to listen to me drone on for hours on end, let alone read a book about my silly stuff. But more importantly, I didn't write it to be a book, and so I felt bad taking money for it, because that wasn't the point. So I thought, well, what I do is I'll give it back to the Douglas Bader Foundation, because without him and his inspiration, I would never have taken the route that I took that led me to here. So they have all the money. So far, about $18,000 worth, which is great. I like that. And what the foundation does is they take kids that have limb loss, arms or legs, and they put them in an airplane, and they show them that they can fly an airplane. And what they're trying to generate from that inspiration is, if you can fly an airplane, you can do anything. And it's a really, really, really cool charity. Their 40th anniversary just came up, and so I got to write the introduction for the 40th anniversary book, which was cool. So I'm very happy about that. Then this happened. I was ferry flying, across the Atlantic, crossing the Pacific, and then I met that one. Some of you know her. And I got to the stage where I was doing this so often that I would turn up to an airplane and think, well, is this one the coffin? That's not a great mindset to approach a ferry flight. And unfortunately, all of those people there are no longer with us, and all of them were friends. And yeah, we all did the same job. So it could have happened to any one of us. It happened to happen to them. This is in fact Simon here. That's his rock. This is in the Sarswag. This is in the fjord that leads to the Sarswag airport. And that's where Simon smashed in, unfortunately. Trying to use a GPS that wasn't really, didn't have the land mapping on it that it should have, because who flies in Greenland? So it was all blocky. Unfortunately, that rock wasn't on it, and he was trying to descend into a fjord. Why did you do that, Simon? But he did, and so a lot of people perished with this job. It wasn't the greatest job. So I thought, let's do something a little safer. Instead of ferry flying, now that I'm married, and I guess I'm going to live in America. And I had ferried a little while ago these things, these British Aerospace ATPs, with this guy, John, who we became friends as a result of that. He was the fleet manager for Air Wisconsin. I don't know where Wisconsin is. I had no idea. But he said, well, quit your whining and come and work for us, and I'll pay you $20 an hour to go fly CRJ around. Okay. So that's where I went. It was cool. I became a captain, became an examiner. I was able to, this was something I'm very proud of, is I was able to give out captain type ratings. I was able to help people in the sim that needed help. That was really rewarding. I was able to help people online that were having issues online. And so I stayed here for quite a while, because even though generally the regional airlines are seen as a stepping stone to a major airline, I looked around at the major airlines and thought, no thanks. I looked at US Airways at the time, who were merging with America West. Their crews hated each other. Everybody was against each other. It was very divisive. And I thought, well, this is nice. My little Air Wisconsin family, they're great. And I was enjoying myself, giving these proficiency checks and type ratings out, and just enjoying life. This is Maggie. She was my second flight student at Air Wisconsin. She's now a Delta captain, doing very well for herself. And then in 2008, Richard Branson came to America and said, well, would you like to help start this airline? And I said, yes, I would, thank you very much. So I joined Virgin America and flew the Airbus out of San Francisco as we were living in the Bay Area, much more convenient. So I reluctantly, after my time at Air Wisconsin, joined Virgin, and it was the best thing I could have ever done. GA was falling by the wayside at this time. I hadn't flown GA for a long time. And then what does Andrea do? She goes and learns to fly in 2009. That's her instructor. That's the text message she sent me because I had the flu. I was in bed, I couldn't see her first solo. So, 2010, there's Uncle Richard. I become a captain on the Airbus. We go do a little formation flight with a spaceship. Nuts. Nuts.
Cool.
And so we're having a really good time with this. But I kind of get the GA bug back. Here's where I'm going to skip. Justin asked airline questions. Boring. So we were flying GA a lot, and so we decided to buy our first little airplane. There it is. And we used that so much and enjoyed it so much that we bought the Cheetah. Almost done. So yeah, we bought the Cheetah, and obviously that's what we have today, and that was fun. 2016, Alaska Airlines buys Virgin America, basically to close us down. We were competition. So they bought us. So I, by default, became an Alaska Airlines pilot. I then had to change fleet to the Boeing, so I ended up flying the Boeing. Or the Guppy, as it's known. Boring airline question. Boring. Then, what my airline career did give me was an opportunity, which was to buy the Chipmunk. This is kind of a bit of, I'm getting to that stage now where the nostalgia's getting to me. I'm getting older. I'm closing the loop here. So here's my little Chipmunk. And this is very, very, very similar to Whiskey Delta 373, the first one I flew. In fact, it was a stablemate. There's a photo of the two of them together back in 1960. And so I was given the opportunity to buy this, had no idea what I was going to do with it. I knew that this was going to be not a money-making scheme, but a money pouring into scheme by trying to keep this old airplane in the air, airworthy. But I had the opportunity to do it, and so why not, right? Operation Save $3,000, you may have heard, I'm not sure. We found out during one of our annuals that the pistons in the Chipmunk were homemade by a guy in Indiana that ended up in jail. We didn't realize that he had also tinkered with my little airplane. Now he did a pretty reasonable job because they lasted 600 hours, but they were just about to not last again for another hour. So we found out that's one of my pistons, that's what should be in there. That's one of my pistons, that's what should be in there. So the parts for this engine are very, very difficult to get. There's only a few people that still specialize in these old techniques and these old engines. One of those guys is a guy called Chris in Melbourne, Australia. And so he made me a whole set of cylinders, cylinder heads, pistons, put them together. And he said, yes, it's going to cost about $3,000 for me to ship them to you. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'm an airline pilot. I can fly for free, well, taxes, $150. I've got 4 days off. If I fly to Australia, that's going to take 1 day. drive from Melbourne to his place. I'll take another day. Take 2 suitcases with me. Put my parts in. Have some food. Go back to the airport. Fly back again. Go back to work. What could go wrong? As it turned out, nothing. It worked like a dream. So, the overhaul that we did came from Australia. They're in the Chipmunk now, and it's flying very well. Last question. This is it. We're done. Last question. What would 9-year-old Steve say to current Steve right now? I don't even know where I came from. I have no idea what happened. I don't know what made this happen. But all of these things that I get to do now for fun, I don't know how it happened. And of course, all of that was bookend by this, by going back to 373, 35 years later, in Enstone, and the guy saying, it's yours, take it flying, which was incredible. There's also a little bit of a closed loop here with the people that I'm able now to help with their journey. People like Jamie, who was one of our flight attendants that went flying in our Cheetah, realized that she could do this, just like I did. She's now an airline captain. People like Morena. Where's Orman? Orman met Morena. Orman liked Morena. She's now at 700 hours working and heading where she's going to head. Lindsay, we've flown together. She's just got her commercial. Jenny, we've flown together in the Grumman. She's now a qualified pilot working on her instrument. And the biggest thing for all of us is this.
Yes.
The Young Eagles.
Because I have a badge.
This is the giving back. This is it. This is what it's all about for me right now. Because so many people help me, now we can inspire the next generation.
Amen.
And this is everything. Everything. My dream is to put the Chipmunk back to doing what it used to do, what it did for me, which is take up people as an air cadet or a young eagle. I would love to do that one of these days. Maybe we will. Finally. How long did that go for? Like an hour and a half?
It feels like far.
Any questions for Steve?
No.
How many hours do we have?
Let's call it 20,000 and I don't know. I have no idea.
Wow.
But that's a lot of hours sitting with an autopilot flying. It's a lot of hours. I don't know. Yeah.
Steve, I noticed that you have there's a lot of names of people that you knew during the ferry that aren't no longer with us.
Yeah.
One of the names, the last name I believe was Katinsky.
Oh, Hardy Kalitsky.
Oh, what was the last name?
Kalitsky.
Kalitsky. Okay.
Yeah, Hardy's a really good friend of mine. We work together a lot, and he, unfortunately, he ended up smashing into the Alps in a 310. All of these, the stories of every one of those names, the story of their demise is, it's so frustrating. I could have done the same. I know I could have, but it's just so. A lot of it is the get-there-itis. It's the just keep going. The airplanes usually were fine, nothing wrong with them. It was decision making. Yeah. Yes, sir. Anyone? Oh, you're vice president. You outrank him. Go.
Did you have any trouble with the Russians flying into Kamchatka?
Yes. Next question. No, I did. I did. They're very frustrating going into Kamchatka. They have an airway route system that if you don't stick to their airway route system, they threaten they will shoot you down. There's no two ways about it. And in the tone that they use, you think, yeah, they probably would. The trouble is, between Adak Island and Kamchatsky, direct is about 500 miles. Not too bad. Unfortunately, to join their airspace system, you have to go north about 250 miles, then join it and go around the belt way to get to Kamchatsky. That's pushing it. So then you think, well, So I wouldn't generally say this, but there may have been some transponder issues.
Who knew?
And some, well, no, let me just look at that. You try and take little shortcuts wherever you can, but because you know that on the approach getting into Kamchatsky, it's going to be, you're going to be tight on fuel. Once you land, then you've got the bureaucracy, which is the bureaucracy in Russia is that I found was everybody wants to be paid. Everybody. If you have the bigger the hat, the more you need to be paid. That's how Russia works. And so what I would do is I employed this guy called Valerie, who's a really, really nice guy, and he was my agent. And so he would deal with the big hat people, and he would keep them away. And his payment, should I say this? Yeah. His payment, Frank, if you bought a new King Air, and I went and picked it up, when I pick up that King Air, Cessna, Beechcraft, all of these manufacturers would fill your minibar for you. So that when your airplane arrived, you think, oh, this is amazing, I've got my own seats, I've got oh, I've even got a minibar, oh, I've got the stock of minis. The minis never made it. Valerie got the minis. So there would be a grocery bag, and Valerie would come up, he'd get the grocery bag, say, this is good. And then the big hat people would come, and he would, and they would walk away again. That's how it worked. So that's about the most problem I got in Kamchatsky. Nice place though, nice people. Yeah. Different.
Oh, I just plug your book. It's about his exploits as a ferry pilot and in GA aircraft. And by golly, there's some hairy edges that you were close to in that book, and it's just it's a great read.
Well, I honestly I didn't, like I said, I didn't set out to write a book. I was flying with a friend of mine, Matt, in the Airbus, and my dad had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we had got into this conversation, and Matt, because I know Matt very well, we can joke around with each other, and it's good humor, it's good banter, and he said, well, if you go the same way as your dad, how are you ever going to tell any of your silly stories? You should probably write these down, so at least you can read them. But then probably if you get really bad Alzheimer's, you'll read them and think, who is this idiot? Why did he do this? And it got me thinking, and I thought, actually, that's not a bad idea, just to write some of these down. But I'm not a writer, I can't write. And so but I started to do these things, and there was one line that I wrote that I thought, oh, that's actually quite good. I like that. I turned off the strobes to mask reality with darkness. That was the line. And I thought, ooh, I kind of like that. That's nice. And so I wrote a little bit more. Eventually, I came up with 10 stories from the ferrying days that I thought were mildly entertaining. And so I gave them to a friend of mine, and he said, yeah, this is great, but why did you get into it? How did you get into it? You can't just, I know you, but if somebody else reads this, they don't know you. Nobody else is going to read this. This is just for me. And maybe some of the people from my ferrying days, I give a copy as memories, so they could, listen or read and remember things. But anyway, so I wrote a little intro, which kind of is that basically what we just did. This is how I got into it. I fell into it. I didn't plan to do it. it just happened, and then these crazy stories happened, and I was able to fly lots of airplanes around the world. That was my education into people, the world, cultures, everything. My whole education was there. It wasn't in English literature class in Southampton. That was my education. So I wrote that thing, put it together, and then to give it to the people that I did meet along the way ferry flying, I just self-published it and made it into a little book so I could put a book on the bookshelf. And that was it. I sent it to these people, and what happened was there was the equivalent of Flying magazine over here. In the UK, it's called Flyer magazine. And they picked it up because when you self-publish, it's automatically available to anybody who wants to buy it. They picked it up and wrote a page article about it, which concerned me because I didn't intend for it to be, I exposed a lot of private me. Now I'm kind of used to it, but there's a lot of private me in there, and it felt a little bit uncomfortable. The guy that wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy said it wasn't intended to be sent out. His early works, and he felt as if he had just stripped naked and run out into the streets for everyone to see. That's it. That was it. But then, that was when I thought, okay, I can't take money for this. It's not intended to make money. That's not the point. And it would just make it seem wrong. And that's when the Douglas Bader thing came in. Well, I'll give it to the foundation. And that closed that loop. And it just, from there, another magazine reviewed it, and then another, and now it's gone crazy. I don't know. It just sells it.
Well done.
Wow.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well done.